welcome to another Jazzy Jeff special video. So, I just want to first get this out of the way. Not entirely sure how this is going to turn out. Not entirely sure how this is going to look. Not entirely sure how this is going to sound. My normal means of recording was my S6 Samsung Galaxy. Had an excellent camera, had an even more excellent video recording, just kind of system on here. Was really easy. Had voice commands. It's kind of unfortunate because I started taking advantage of the voice commands on here. You could literally say the word record, cheese, take picture, things like that, and it would do all that. Of course, now with my luck that recording was getting easier, this had to break. Unfortunately, it is what it is. So, I have another camera though, Logitech 1080p sort of HD camera. I also have a Samsung microphone, which I normally use this camera and this microphone for like live streams, chatting with friends, just kind of random, bullshit. So I'm hoping that the quality is similar to what you guys are used to as far as camera footage goes, video footage goes, that sort of thing. So all that being said, let's move on to the video. Alright, so first up, I just want to say a special shout out to Colin Richards, or Colin Richards Art. He has a YouTube page. I'm subscribed to him. You can find him in my list of people that I'm subscribed to, and you can also just look him up under his name. He has a series. His name on YouTube is Markers and Monsters. However, he does do various drawing shows and just various videos and all kinds of cool stuff. He just recently did some model videos, which were really neat. I actually didn't know a whole lot about a lot of those videos, so they were very cool, very informative. So if you like, monsters and the macabre and model kits and neat things like that, check out his channel. So he had actually asked me a question. I know that I am currently preparing I'm working on the question videos, but outside of that, the question he had was more of a video type question, so I figured I would actually dedicate a whole video to this one specific topic. So he had asked me about what Universal Monster films do I have on VHS. And I know I've been like showing them here and there and there and here and bits and pieces. And I know a lot of you are getting annoyed trying to figure out what does he have, what's the full collection. I'm not trying to watch like 7 videos. I just want it given to me, instant gratification. Boom! So here it comes. This is Jazzy Jeff's Universal Horror Movies collection. Sort of the quintessential collection, when you think of Universal Monster films, these are the ones that come to mind. These are the ones that Universal owns. These are the ones that fans tend to recognize. This set is from 1999. Probably one of the last times that these guys were released on tape. Because probably not long after that, they started releasing them on DVD and then obviously on Blu-ray and etc. You guys have probably seen most of these tapes before. However, I will go ahead and show you guys each tape. So, here is the Phantom of the Opera. This is the remake from 1943. Obviously, the original one was with Lon Chaney, but that was back in the 20s when there was still issues with like rights and who owned what, and the film fell into public domain, unfortunately, and is not owned by an official studio. However, anybody can pretty much release versions of that film. Universal in the 40s decided to go back and redo the movie and release the film under the same name, but with all new actors, all new in color, all new, effects and like the cast and the why am I drawing a blank? A whole new set, like bigger sets and bigger budget, and you can clearly tell it's a much bigger budget. Just really, they brought everything to the table with this film. But unfortunately, because of that, it loses some of the grittiness, some of the acting, some of the feeling, and just the overall aura of the film is lost because it's been colorized. Phantom of the Opera is definitely one of those films that you have to watch in black and white. You have to watch the original one. Okay, up next, you guys have probably seen this a million times. I know I've talked about this a million times, so I'm just going to keep it short and sweet. But here is Dracula. So, Carl Laemmle. This is obviously probably one of the oldest films in this set from 1931. It's pretty interesting that this didn't fall in the public domain because it easily could have, because there was definitely still a lot of issues, with rights and with film companies and studios just starting up and some studios going bankrupt because obviously it was the Depression and things like that. Another interesting thing that I always forget to talk about is there is a Spanish version that's floating around that's also officially released and owned by Universal Studios. A little bit harder to find. Some people actually claim that it's better, and the Dracula in it is actually better. He's a better representation of Dracula. I haven't seen it, so I don't have an opinion on that. But I would love to get my hands on it at some point for sure. Okay, up next, of course, I have Frankenstein, which I may have shown this to you guys also at some point. Another 1931 film that came out. I believe Dracula was released first that year, and then later that year, Frankenstein came out. But these two were sort of the originals, sort of the granddaddies of the monsters. If you were to say who were the original two, I'd say Dracula and Frankenstein. However, you could argue, going a little further back to the 20s, you could argue The Hunchback of Notre Dame. You could also argue, the original Phantom of the Opera. There was also Edison came out with a Frankenstein film in like the teens, like 1913 or 1914. And obviously you also have to give credit to Nosferatu, which also was the 20s. So those were sort of the great granddaddy monsters that are always getting parodied, and whenever you see horror collages, they always involve a scene from Nosferatu or two. So it's pretty interesting. But if you were to say the big budget, the official beginning of Hollywood, I would say what we consider Hollywood today, like sort of the definition of what it is in our day and age, I would say Dracula and Frankenstein are sort of the beginning of that. Okay, up next, of course, if you're going to have a monster, you're going to need to give that monster a bride. Some say that this is the quintessential greatest horror sequel of all time. Some people say it's the best Universal sequel. Others even say that it is the best Frankenstein sequel. Once again, those are a lot of loaded statements. I personally really enjoy this one and The Son of Frankenstein. They're both excellent, excellent films. They both continue the story. And overall, in general, they're just really well-made, well-thought-out films. After that, then the Frankenstein movies started getting silly. But nothing beats the original. I mean, I love the way the original ends. If you haven't seen it, I'm not going to say anything. All I'm going to say is go watch it. It's short. It's easy. You could easily fit it in on a lovely Saturday, like a nice day like today. Sit down. It's like under an hour. It's good stuff. We have The Invisible Man. One of Claude Rains' possibly best roles. One of Universal's probably best films, period. I mean, it's hard for me to consider this a monster film or Universal monster film or even a horror film because it is so well made. Putting this in the same category as the rest of the Universal monster films is actually kind of doing this a disservice. Not to say that Frankenstein and Dracula aren't classics, and Wolfman and the Mummy are great ones, but there was something about how this was made, how it was filmed, the plot of the movie, the acting in the movie, and just the overall... It just packs a wallop. Like, when you watch this, you forget you're watching a horror movie. You forget you're watching a thriller. You forget you're watching a Universal monster film. Like, this does not come off like a typical monster film, so to speak. It takes the genre, it switches it, it shakes it up, it does something completely new, and it reinvents the entire genre. For 1933, being black and white, this is a fantastic film. I cannot say that enough. Every time I watch it, I like it even more than the time before. Does not get old. Tons of rewatchability. Check it out. It's The Invisible Man. Alright. So, there's always that one film in the bunch that's good, and I love it. I like this one a lot. But I would say it's probably the cheesiest. Probably has the weakest story. It almost feels kind of forced. But you gotta have this one in there. The motherfucking Wolfman. Say what you will about it. There's great things about it. And there's some bad things about it. I think by the 40s... a lot had changed with Universal. A lot of actors had moved on or passed away or just different people that were involved. And times changed too. I mean, the world was a completely different place by the time that the 1930s had ended. And I think that all affected this film. Had this film come out maybe earlier and maybe... it was acted by someone else, it might have been different. I'm not saying Lon Chaney Jr. was bad in any way, but he wasn't as good as his father or the originals. And I know some people might argue with me or they might not like to hear that, but he's a great actor and he's in some really good horror films, don't get me wrong. But I think at this point, by the 40s... the genre and just the overall monster film, like, serials and series had begun to kind of run its course. Not to mention, tons of sequels started pouring out all throughout the 30s into the 40s. So, I think this one had a lot of competition. But like I said before, the werewolf story never gets old. It's one of those folklores that have been around for generations and generations. It'll be around long after I'm gone. So it's kind of like a staple. It's like you gotta have a wolf film. A werewolf film. And that being said, same thing applies for this next film. You gotta have a werewolf film, and you gotta have a mummy film. So, you can't have one without the other. So here we have Boris Karloff in another one of his iconic roles, obviously as the Mummy. This one is from 1932. So this one came out a year after the big success smash hits of both Frankenstein and Dracula, of course. This is where it started getting almost a little bit cheesier and a little bit more like the formula, you know what I mean? Like Dracula was sort of the test, you know, Frankenstein was like the exam, and then this was sort of like the fun take-home project that you get to do. I'm not saying that, not trying to disservice this in any way, shape, or form. However, this particular film, it's great, but there's some things that I don't like about it, like the pacing of it is a little off, and like I said, once again, some of the acting and dialogue's a little weird, because this is right around the time where the silent era was ending and talkies were springing up. So I think a lot of people, it was tough for them to act and speak certain lines, so some stuff gets delivered a little too strong. And like, if you guys watch it, you know what I mean. But another one that I love for sure, and the sequels just get absolutely out of control, but underappreciated at best. However, the Swan Song was best in Dracula, but they borrowed it and put it back in this one, and that's some bullshit. That belongs in fucking Dracula. So, anyway, the next one, you guys are going to be really surprised. It's really funny. This film took me the longest to get around to watching. It took me the longest to finally buy. But I was always so intrigued and interested by it. And it is by far definitely the cheesiest, and it is by far probably the most goofiest. And it came so long and so late after the genre. 1954 is when this came out, just to give you guys an idea. So you got 1931 when Dracula came out, 1954 when the creature from the black fucking motherfucking lagoon came out. And holy hell, this movie, dude. This movie. So much to be said about it. It's such a fun movie. Such a great film. Totally 50s. Completely different. Outside of its time. Outside of its element. But it is a great film. And it's a lot of fun. And it's The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And, like, typical monster movie, popcorn monster movie, you know, everything that you would want from it. And obviously, this was still considered part of the Universal Monster series, which by 1954 was certainly pushing it. But I'm really glad that Gilman made it in. Just because you're last doesn't mean you don't count, and doesn't mean you're not important. And sometimes being last almost makes you a little bit more important. So, don't want to say too much about this film because I could talk about it forever, not to mention don't want to spoil any of these for people that haven't seen them. But if you haven't seen them, I really recommend get out there and watch them. I know there's a lot of people that don't like black and white films, and I know there's a lot of people in general that just don't like watching old films. But if I were to recommend any of these to you guys, I would totally recommend Creature from the Black Lagoon, 100%, as a fun popcorn kind of, you know, monster late night film. Absolutely, I recommend The Invisible Man. And by all means, you need to absolutely check out Frankenstein, if not Frankenstein, The Bride of Frankenstein. Both of those films are like quintessential in the whole sort of Universal monster circuit. Phantom of the Opera, I'd say skip it. I don't really care for that one as much. Not everybody seems to like The Mummy. Dracula, same thing. I love Dracula, don't get me wrong. That's probably up there. It's hard for me to pick one. I mean, if I had to pick one of these, it would be between The Invisible Man and Dracula. But Dracula's another one. I don't see everybody getting into that film. It's, once again, the pacing and everything about it is different. But that's another one I would recommend if you think that, you know, if you like Frankenstein, then I would do Dracula. But Invisible Man and Creature from the Black Lagoon. So that's the 1999 set. This video is starting to get a little long, so I'm actually going to end it here. And then part 2 will be all my other just sort of loose random tapes that I have that I've picked up online or just at various places. So this has been Jazzy Jeff with my Universal Horror Monsters collection, part 1. See you guys for part 2.